Welcome to Oracle Application Express Apex Regions Shared Components. A shared component is a component that can be defined once inside of your application and then reused over and over again. When we were looking at forms in previous lessons, we took a look at our first shared component, a list of values. An LOV can be defined once and then used over and over again inside of the application. If you go to the main page for your application, you'll see a big icon in the middle of the screen called Shared Components. Shared components can be broken down into different categories: logic, navigation, security, user interface, files, globalization, and reports. In upcoming lessons on the user interface, we'll take a look at the shared components under user interface and files, and we'll do the same when we get to the security lessons. For this lesson, we'll take a look at the shared components under logic and navigation. The first shared component under logic is called an application item. You can think of an application item like a global variable that can be used throughout your application. You simply select application item, create, give your application item a name, define its scope, whether it's for the application or if it's global, any type of security, configuration, or comments, and click Create Application Item. I can now use this variable anywhere inside of my application. So I'm going to hop back into Application 101. I'll pick the movie entry page. Right when the page loads, I want to determine the system time and display that on the page. So before the header loads, I'm going to create a new computation. I can create a computation based on an item on the page, an item on another page, or an application level item. I just created a new application level item, so I'm going to pick logged in time. I want it to be based off a SQL query, where I'm going to query sysdate out of the database and display it on the page. I'm going to select the word hello, concatenate that with a special variable that holds information about my application user inside of Oracle Application Express. I'm going to concatenate that with a string that says page loaded at, and then I'm going to select sysdate from the database and use the toChar function to get the hours, minutes, and seconds. I can create a new region on the page. So under body, I'm going to create a plain HTML region, and I'm going to give it a low sequence number because I want it to display at the top of the page. Under the HTML text region source, I can reference the variable I've created by using ampersand sign, the variable name, and a period at the end of it. I'm not going to have any conditions associated with this region. So now when I run this page, before the header loads, the computation should run, populate this global variable that I've created called logged in time, and then when it comes to display the regions on the page, because I gave time display a low sequence value to display at the top of the screen with the values that have been populated by the computation. You can see I now have a new region on the top of the page. It says hello and who I'm logged in as, admin, which matches who I am logged in as over here, and the page was loaded at a specific time. I can see that this is dynamic by reloading the page and seeing the time change here in the display. If we look at each one of the pages that makes up our application, you'll see that there are different places where processes can be executed: before the header, after the header, before the region, after the region, before the footer, and after the footer. A process can almost be thought of like a trigger in the database. It's something that gets fired at a certain period of time. You can see we have different types of processes that can be executed automatically. We can execute a piece of PL SQL code. We can reset the pagination. We can execute a plugin. We can call a web service, manipulate data, change the session state, change the form pagination, send an email, close a pop-up window, or run an on-demand process. If we look at these processes at the page level, you can see we can define them specifically for this page. But if we look at processes at the shared components level, if we define an application process here, it gets executed every time a page loads, before the header, after the header, before the body, after the body. It's basically saying I'm going to define an application process to execute every single time a page hits one of these elements. Application processes defined at the shared components level are also limited to PL/SQL anonymous blocks. We have a lot more flexibility when we create a process that runs on an individual page. An application computation is just like creating a global computation item. If I go into individual pages, there are places that I can create computations. Before the header, after the header, before the region, after the region, before the footer, and after the footer. Once I create these computations, I can use them anywhere inside of my application. I can either display the values that I've computed, or I can use them to decide the type of programming logic inside of my application. An application computation can be used anywhere inside of my application. It's not limited to a specific page. You can see when I come to select my computation item, I can either compute an application level item or a page level item. I can specify when the computation is executed, what type of computation I'm going to perform, the actual computation itself, an error message, if I need an additional authentication scheme, any type of condition, my build options, and any comments that go along with it. A web service reference allows me to access a web service that's outside of my Oracle Apex environment. Web services are a little beyond the scope of what we're trying to discuss here in these Oracle Application Express lessons. But understand that a web service is like a little black box of functionality that's exposed over the internet. Web services are really powerful because they're all based on standards. So it doesn't really matter what programming language the web service was defined in or how it's implemented over the internet. Oracle Application Express can access these web services to enhance the functionality of your application. In the lesson on web services, we'll talk a little bit more about web service references.